morning, and I'm Celine, and I'm training with SMU in the whole area of data protection. I guess because we have evolved, and the mindsets actually is not just one type of mindsets. I don't believe that. And from the different groups of people that I've come across over the last few years, it's a whole spectrum, as you would have in any population. So there's the spectrum of folks who are really, into the learning and lifelong learning. And we've met people who've actually gone into looking to learn all sorts of different things. But there's also a group of people probably that's, having challenges, figuring out how they're going to be learning all of these new areas. And it's because probably of the pandemic and the circuit breakers. Now we've got more time and we've got the opportunities to go into different learnings. That's, I'm seeing a evolution of those sort of learning mindsets. Because I've been in education for a long time as well, right? Being in schools, and it's been, even as Singapore first started, it's been one of those things that we always look to move and push, where it is, because of the position of where Singapore is as a tiny little island, and the whole mindset of, okay, we've got to stay competitive, we've got to keep learning where's the new areas. So if you look at the history of Singapore, right, we went into different industries along the years, and how we actually, got into these areas from nothing. And at this point in time, because there's a few different forces coming together, work, the world economy, the nature of jobs, AI, automation, those areas, plus the pandemic we've got, it all came together. But at the same time, because of the policies that we have got over here, it actually provided a lot of opportunities for people to allow us to learn. I actually don't think so, but I think we are in a better position because of the infrastructure, because of the resources that's been built up over the years, the education system that has helped in making Singapore in making English as the primary language, that's allowed us the opportunity to continue, because a lot of the new research are in English, and because we've got the ability to read and get into the infrastructure of the internet and all that, I think it's given us an advantage in that. If you look at the other countries where they are resource rich, right, and if the fundamentals are not put in place, right, in terms of the infrastructure. Let's say, when the pandemic, got us shut down, right, and we went to circuit breaker, everybody's learning from home. We had to have the laptops for students. We had to have enough Wi-Fi, right, the internet connections. We have to have people who are familiar with these new technologies. And we actually have had the IT master plan for education for 30 years? And that was in the years where teachers never used the laptop to teach. We never used PowerPoint. And all teachers at that point had to learn to use PowerPoints. So we started with bite size, and it was just over the years of accumulation. And even now, there are still people who struggle with the online, with Zoom, with all your internet conference tools and so on. But everybody else, because we got no choice, so everybody has to get help from somebody. I met a gentleman who's 80 years old, right? And he is in his second employment. He's retired from his previous job, second employment, and he's learning how to use Zoom. But he's got his younger colleagues to come and set it up for him, help him learn that. And I said, I always say to the class and the participants, when I grow up, I want to be just like him. His motivation was he wanted to keep himself busy. Yeah, he wanted to find, not so much to reinvent himself per se, because he's 80, right? But he wants to keep himself, having a meaningful way to engage himself. And his expertise were in the areas of security, And those were the areas that he knew best. So that was where his strength was and his background and experience. So the organization tapped on that. And as a result of that, he had to then understand the other new areas that he may not be familiar with. And that's when he then decided, okay, I need to learn these things. And how do I figure these things out? Yeah. Pretty much most of the people I encounter nowadays are mid-career, mostly in their 40s and so on. But we do see a few new grads, and I have had the opportunities to work with the new grads and those who are just about to graduate in the areas of work that I do, and because they are looking to gain a competitive advantage for themselves. And so these group of students want to know what it is before they get out to the workforce, right? But these other group, and this is a whole spectrum of people again. Those who are what we call who are appointed, who are volunteered by the organization. Those who are volunteers themselves, right, to take on the new position. So because of that, they come, and when you come with a different mindset, when you come with a different set of beliefs, I have to do it because my boss told me. And it's a very different thing. I'm doing it because, I want to keep myself career resilience. I want to keep myself in the forefront so that I can be of greater value, right, to the organization, and that I gain skill sets and knowledge that are transferable. I would say yes, yeah. And when I don't know if you have met with people who's gone through the Japanese occupation, for example, right? My grandma was born 1914, and she passed on 98 years old, and she went through pretty much everything, right, that Singapore went through. And when you are forced to a situation where you got zero choice in order to survive, in order to make ends meet, you are forced to figure your way around things. And I think the pandemic, created a situation where everybody's in the same boat. And it's not just in Singapore, it's the whole world. And so we got to make it, and we got to find a way to make it together. And because of that, the government were there, the organization working together, the staff, the employees, those who are unemployed. We are all now trying to figure out ways to how do we make it, not just as individuals, not just as organizations, but how do we make it as a country? I think it was quite dire, quite dreary in the early months, and we were feeling the heaviness of things. But I could feel, like the whole country came together when there were those moments, like sing, right? So the whole estates were starting to sing loudly, and I felt really touched. Yeah. So those were the kind of things I think that's together we can figure out our way. Just as we had done in the years of past, that was what happened. I think there's a couple of things, yeah. One, because we speak English, and a big majority has a second language, whether it is Malay, whether it is their mother tongue, whether it's Chinese, and because of that, we are better able to communicate, yeah. Number two, the ability for us to understand tech, get onto the internet, be able to travel. So those are areas that it has allowed us to do this. But number three, I think because of this background, when we know where our strengths are, and a big part, I think, of Singapore's strengths is we have figured out ways to set up systems. We've figured out ways where we are able to export things that we figured out that could work, that nobody else has tried, but we know that we've got to create a unique set of circumstances that allows us to progress in spite of, right? That has allowed us the ability to figure out how to go about creating these new systems that allows things to work and being able to work with other people in other cultures. Because I think it all goes back to how the education system tries to get people to work together with different language, different cultures, figuring out how to make things better. And as an example, for example, when I saw this little quote, and I've never understood for a long time why, we wanted to plant trees. It is beautiful, right? We want to plant trees along our highways and along the roads and in the districts and all that. I never quite understood why until I saw a little quote that Lee Kuan Yew was asking the person who was in charge of N Parks, create a testimonial that tells the world we are here to stay. And what better way, than to have trees that takes years to grow and that it's right up there. And so in that sense, I guess for me, when I realized that, it's like, you know what, we are here to stay. Yes, there may be challenges along the way, as you would have, right, in life. Life is not just one way up or one way down. Life will have, all sorts of things thrown at you. But how do we, get better? How do we find a way? And nature will find a way, right? The trees will grow where there's the conditions best meet them, with the sunlight, the water and all that. But you do need some form of nurturing. You do need some ability where the conditions are best met that would allow you to thrive. And so as much as we are providing all that, I think it also comes to the point where individually we need to find those ways for ourselves. So the infrastructure is there for the things that we can do, but at the same time, we need to own it. And we need to be prepared to pay the price that would create the value that is most important to us and what matters most to us. Yeah. But at the same time, it's also because there's now this ability that the rest of the world can also do it online, then we also have to figure out, okay, why would the multinationals choose us over somebody else who might be priced lower? Yeah.
Do you have thoughts on that?
I think that's the way to go now, simply because when you're an adult learner, you're working or you are looking after, family and so on. So you don't have the luxury of putting in everything aside for 2-3 years and then just doing nothing but learning. So you've got no choice but to do it in bite size, and the bite size may be half a day, it may be 1 day, it may be a couple of days, and that I think allows us to learn it, apply it, understand it, test out if it works, experiment. I like the word experiment. And if we actually look back at some of the policies that the country has, or that some of the strategies, right, that right now, or at least in the last few years, that the various universities have started to put in place for adult learners and all that, it's a series of different experiments. What's going to work, what's not going to work. And I think personally for myself, it's how do we experiment, with the different strategies that will work for each of us, because there is no one strategy that will work for every single person, and we will have to tweak it in order to make it work for us based on what the time is like for us, why we want to learn it, how we actually learn. There are various learning strengths that we have, but we also have various weaknesses, and that's unique to each of us, that's unique to each of our circumstances. And so I'm finding that as we are progressing, and the experience I had with adult learners over the last few years is that this helps, but what will be helpful to go with that is to have maybe some examples of success, some examples of failures that the folks can experience or they can look at, and then from there have people that they can bounce off ideas, have a community where they can share ideas, and that actually may work a lot better. One of the things was with the new laws that we were looking at, yeah, there weren't many people with this sort of background. So what we did was we started creating in terms of borrowing a framework, right? And looking at, okay, how do we best understand, each of these parts? What are the skill sets and the knowledge that you need? And one, for example, in the whole area of data protection, right? And if you're going to be a data protection officer, then what are skill sets you need? What are knowledge you need? Okay, you need to know the law. Then, what's the easiest way for you to learn the law? And is there and we came up with an acronym, and that helped. And one of the things that I realized is that we need to know how to ask better questions. And we need to ask questions that allowed us to learn better, right? So that's number one. Then number two is like, okay, then what are the different things we got to be able to look at that will allow us to know if we are actually progressing? And one of the things is the ability to observe. The ability to observe what's going on in terms of the process as well as the outcome. Because a lot of times we're very outcome driven, but we forget the progress. And we forget the process itself of learning. So you can come to the same outcome, but the process is different. And when the process is different, you may find that while you get to the same outcome, whether you are able to go long term to figure out, the lifelong learning and to go further, is going to be curtailed by the not understanding the process, all right? So this is an area that I actually borrowed from my years of being in teaching, right? For years and years, and this might not be appropriate to use in this context, but there is a belief years ago that if you don't know how to catch and throw a ball, right, you will never learn how to throw and catch a ball. And I've always wondered, why is that, what if it's possible? And so as I went in to look at biomechanics, yeah, it's like, well, shooting the ball, how do you increase the probability of getting the ball into the hoop? And the moment you can get it in line, you increase the probability. When you get it to a certain angle, you increase the probability. So how do I do that, with the students that I used to be teaching? And it's like, okay, can I, narrow it down so that they don't toss the ball everywhere, right? And the moment you get them to get, their elbows, their wrists aligned, their shoulders aligned, and you just focus on, all right, forget about getting the ball in the hoop. Just aim to get the ball in alignment with the hoop, right? When you do that, their alignment and the ability for them to get the ball in line increases the probability of them getting the outcome of the ball being in the hoop. And that was then I realized, you know what? The kid it's not that the child cannot catch and throw the ball. It's that the strategy they're using doesn't work, and it makes it even more difficult for them to throw and catch a ball. Because if you observe a child trying to catch a ball who's struggling, you observe there's a vastly big difference of them doing it. The people who can do it, they'll do it this way, which means they are able to increase the probability of them catching the ball. Whereas the child who cannot catch a ball will catch the ball like this, which means the probability, they've got to really have a ability to time it so finely, which means they get hit a lot more.
Right.
And when you get hit a lot more, you tend to close your eyes,
Right.
which tends to, decrease the chance of you catching the ball. So that was a concept that I pulled from education into this new field of adult learning. It's like, okay, how do I pace it out? Yeah, and in order that there are little things that they can catch and they can understand in bite size, and then as they feel the success each time, the confidence grows. And when the confidence grows, then the belief starts to change. You know what? Maybe I can do this. And always, but because they are adult learners, then it's always pulling that, what's first principle? And that reiteration, the elaboration of the first principles then starts being repeated, because when we are adults, our memory is very different.
Yes.
The way we learn has shifted, and research has shown that, yeah, when we go beyond 35 years of age, the way our memory degrades, and it's a natural fact, yeah. So we've got to figure out new ways of learning that's different from when we were a child. Then when we get to 50, 60, that sort of age group, the learning again changes. So we also have to figure out new ways of learning that's very different, because the way the brain connects shifts. And so there is this thing that we don't understand enough about the neuroscience of our brain, and there is a misconception that how we learn, if we cannot, then it's because I'm old. It's because I cannot learn. But that's not necessarily true. And I believe that it's because the strategy we've used then no longer works, so we got to figure out new ways. I don't think there will be a plateau. And the reason is because technology is advancing so fast. We have to understand and we have to learn about the new technologies. If we don't, we will not be able to find the new ways that we will reinvent ourselves yet again. And one of the ways that Singapore has stayed relevant is we are continually reinventing ourselves. And with the push of AI, machine learning, and even new technologies, we have to understand how the AI works. We have to understand how algorithms are going to drive our lives. One of the major things that, for example, I was sharing with a lot of different classes, we must understanding fundamentally the big difference between what's cause and effect versus what's correlation. And that's a huge, it's a very different concept in terms of understanding the world, because we're now going into the digital world where the machines and the algorithms will be making those decisions, and these are correlation based decisions. They are not cause and effect, but our brains evolve a lot slower. It evolves in thousands of years, not in months or days. And the algorithms are progressing at that speed, but they are correlation based. They are not cause and effect. But because we are so used to cause and effect, A happens, therefore B happens. But there are a lot of times whereby A happens leads to B, C, D, and therefore E happens. Yeah? And our brain will say, oh, because A happens, so therefore we get E, right? And there are too many things that we may not be able to see behind the scenes. And we do need to understand this difference, this big difference between these two concepts. And I think this is going to be a really important principle to get to, because that's where the world is moving into. Yeah. This may be the most important thing. One, we've got to each have that beginning belief that we can learn, and each of us has actually had the ability to learn since we were a baby, right? And the concept of learning then is we never tell a child after 3 days of trying to walk, forget it. You know what? You will never learn how to walk, so forget it, right? We never say that to a child, because the child do not have a belief that it cannot walk or he or she cannot walk. And so they'll just keep trying and keep experimenting until they figure it out. Yeah. And even if a child, wouldn't, we as adults and the caregivers or caretakers will, come on, let's go, you can do it, And we motivate, we incentivize, we push, the baby to do that. So as we're adults, can we have that same belief and that same mindset that, you know what, let's figure this out until we get it. And I feel it's an important thing, because we can learn this. Just as, how long is it going to take is it possible, right? For example, is it possible for you to become a concert pianist? Yeah. And if it says no, what if I change the question? Is it possible for you to become a concert pianist in 100 years? And the answer will be yes, right? Then the third question is, are you prepared to pay the price of that 100 years of doing a lot of the practicing to be that concert pianist? And if you are prepared to, in 100 years, the likelihood is you will be a concert pianist. Yeah. And so that's belief and that ability then to start practicing and to start experimenting, and finally to really understand our strengths, our learning weakness, and finding ways of how do we create then the strategies that would best help ourselves learn. I think that would be the key to keep us moving. Yeah, the why, the how, and the what, and for us to figure those things out.